All right, one of the questions that was asked, I had to get a resource. So that's why I'm on my phone. I'm not playing Candy Crush. I mean, I like Candy Crush as much as the next guy. I don't trust doctors if they act like they have all the answers. I trust them if they say, I need to look that up. And that is true for ministers sometimes too. But my first question here is my favorite Mile of Music act this year. It's a tough one. I have 2 little kids, and we don't want to pay a babysitter, so we are relegated to the very hot outdoor all ages stages. And it seems like they've gotten less and less all ages venues this year. Does anyone else feel that way? Okay. All the other parents are like, you bring your kids to Mile of Music? What? So yesterday we saw Sarah Potenza. She was incredible. Karen was there. It was fun. She's just got this cool soul voice. We also saw the Periodicals. They were really cool. They were this 9-piece band with horns, and this black woman with this incredible fro was the lead singer, and they were good. But we've become big fans of Mike Maines and the Branches, so we saw them Friday night. And I don't know, are they playing again today? Do you know, Brian? I'm looking at my husband. He's like, I don't know. Yeah, so if you get a chance to catch Mike Maines and the Branches, they're really, really fun. I actually saw them for the first time at a house concert hosted by a member of this fellowship, so that's part of the reason we're such big fans of Mike Maines. And yesterday morning at about 4 a.m, I shot off an email to Mike Maines' manager asking if they could come do the service next year here. So they were like, hey, we'll let you know. So I don't know. That might be like what I say to my kids, like maybe. But that was exciting. Next question. I really enjoyed the Monk and Robot books you suggested last year. So what's next on the Reverend Christina reading list? So many things. If you weren't here last year when I did the series, I did a 2-part series on lessons I've learned from books about robots. And one was a children's book called The Wild Robot. Highly recommend it. And they're making it into a movie that's coming out in September, so that'll be cool. And then the other book is a 2-part series by Becky Chambers. It's an adult sci-fi. It's called cozy sci-fi is the genre. Not like scary sci-fi. It's cozy sci-fi. You wrap yourself in a blanket and read it. And it's about a monk far, far, far into the future and a robot, and they meet each other and how they learn about humanity through that encounter, and it's so good. I don't know. I have too many books I want to recommend, but one that has just been sticking with me that I believe somebody here at the fellowship, it might have been Marcia Dawson who recommended it, and it's not a new book, but it's called The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek. And if you won the book breakfast with me for the auction, The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek was in your book basket. Is anyone here from that group? No? Okay. There's probably 6 people coming for this book conversation. So The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek takes place in the, I want to say 40s or 50s, deep in Appalachia. And it's during the height of the mines, the coal mines and the coal industry, just destroying these towns. And was it you, Deb, who recommended this book? No? Okay. And there was they don't have access to libraries, they don't have very many schools. It's really just a deeply economically depressed area. And the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, was, I know, Maisie, sorry. The Works Progress Administration created a grant to fund these women who would ride their mules and donkeys or horses through these mountain passes to bring books as a sort of a library to other people in the area. And then they would go the next week and pick up the books and bring them new books, and they would get, all of their books were donated, and they would piece together these little scrapbooks for, based on magazine clippings and stuff for people, and it was just incredible. So that part's a true story, but this is a fictional book. But you get to learn all about that. And the thing that's a little twist on this particular version of the story is that the main character has a medical condition that affects her blood, that makes her blood have a low level of hemoglobin and makes it very dark colored. It has no other health ramifications, but it makes her skin blue. And it's real. This is a real medical condition that was not common, but not uncommon in that part of the world, particularly due to inbreeding. And the blues were discriminated against the same way any person of color would have been, even though they were racially white. And so there's a whole separate layer to this book about her work as a bookwoman, in addition to the fact that she's a blue. And there even ends up being, she falls in love, and the man, and everything is good, and they're gonna get married, but miscegenation laws make that difficult. So I don't wanna give anything else away, but it's very good. Highly recommend the book Woman of Troublesome Creek. What is the difference historically between Unitarianism and Universalism, and how did they come together to form UU? All right, so I do a 3-part class on this every couple of years. It totals 6 hours. So I'm not gonna do that today. But the very, very short answer, so that is just to say that there is a long answer to go with this question, and it's fascinating. And if you've ever been to my class that I do, the UU University on Unitarian Universalist history, I get very excited. I'm like, because it's cool. We have really cool history. But the very short version of the answer is that Unitarianism dates back all the way to 325 CE at the Council of Nicaea, which if you ever recited the Nicene Creed, that was what emerged out of the Council of Nicaea. And one of the things that was decided at the Council of Nicaea, among other things, including the date of Easter, was, is Jesus God, was the question. And if you've ever recited the Nicene Creed, the answer is yes, same substance as God. But there were other perspectives at that council, and one of them was led by a man named Arius, A-R-I-U-S, and he said no. Jesus is not the same substance as God. God is God. Jesus is over here. Jesus is Jesus. God is the Father, just one thing, not made up of 3 things. And so the Trinity is if God is made up of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's the Trinitarian perspective. Tri meaning 3. If God is one thing, and Jesus is separate from that thing, then that is the Unitarian perspective. So that is, for a long time, became known as the Arian perspective, A-R-I-A-N, after Arius, not the other kind of Arian. Let's be very clear. And it evolved over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and it had to sort of go underground because it was heresy. If you didn't follow what they had decided at the Council of Nicaea, you were wrong. You were a heretic. Fun fact, the word heresy just means choice. You chose wrong, I guess. But every time there was a branch, a fork in the road, our ancestors were the heretics. I wrote a middle school curriculum years and years and years ago called Happy Heretics. Because middle schoolers, like, they want nothing more than to choose whatever their parents don't want them to choose, right? So Unitarian meant God is one. God is a unity. Jesus is not God. Jesus is a man, a teacher, maybe very much like God, maybe a role model. There's lots of different Unitarian perspectives over time. But that's what Unitarian meant. Over time, Unitarian became more and more, had more and more emphasis on character and reason and rationality and following the moral standards that Jesus set. That became sort of what Unitarianism was about. Universalism was a whole different thing. It doesn't have as long of a history. It emerges out of England and into the United States in the 1800s, and it means that everyone universally was going to heaven or universally was saved. The idea that at that time, especially in the United States, there was a lot of emphasis on hellfire and damnation. And they were sort of the pushback to that, the Universalists, saying God is loving. Why would God damn anyone to this incredibly horrible place? If God is a father, are any of you fathers? Like, would you do that to your child even if you're really mad at them? And so that's what Universalism was about. And so over time, it was over about 100 years, they just got closer and closer together. And first, the teenagers, the youth groups, got together, and they created something, the Unitarian and Universalist youth groups. They created the Liberal Religious Youth, or LRY. And then the women got together, and they mostly had run into each other a lot at justice events. And so they created like a UU women's group. And then the hymnal commissions got together, and they made a single hymnal. And then in 1961, the men got together, and we call that the official merger. Just kidding. There's actually more to it than that. But it is true that finally, the men they had a lot of policies they had to make and stuff. And then they became one thing. And when they became one thing, they decided that they were no longer going to be explicitly Christian, because up until that point, they were. Now, other Christians might have looked in from the outside and said, like, that's not Christian, but they would have called themselves that. And there's more to it than that as well, for those of you that have taken my 6-hour class. But in 1961, they decided that this new thing, this Unitarian Universalism, would be non-creedal, which means that we don't have a creed. We don't say you have to believe X, Y, or Z in order to be a part of the group. Instead, we have our principles or our values that bind us together, and we have our covenants, which are our agreements with each other. And there's a lot more to it than that, but one God, good behavior, follow the teachings of good moral teachers. God is love. We should all love each other and be loving. That's Unitarian Universalism. How do I talk to my family when they express disappointment that my kids didn't do the Catholic rites of passage like First Communion or Confirmation? Every family is different, so one thing that I like to help people know is some of that history, because that helps. If you know some of the Unitarian Universalist history, it helps you be able to talk to other people about it. And also helping family members know that we do have rituals and rites of passage here. We have our water mingling ceremony, which we do every fall. It'll be September 8th. We have our flower communion or flower celebration in the spring, usually the first Sunday of June. Those are uniquely Unitarian Universalist celebrations, and they're really powerful. The flower celebration emerged out of World War II, and the man who originated it died a prisoner at Dachau concentration camp. And so we carry it forward in his memory. These are not like new agey, flippant rituals that somebody invented. They have deep meaning, and we do have those here. We also have we have our coming of age program, which now is embedded in our BATS program, which is our high school youth program. But there is a year where they examine their values, write their own credo, work with an adult mentor who is not part of their family. They present those credos in front of the entire congregation. If you've ever seen that service, it is life-changing. I think I decided to become a UU when I saw one of those. I was like, why didn't I have that? I created something years and years ago. We haven't done it here, but we might. I created something for 3rd and 4th graders that was sort of the equivalent of a First Communion. We called it affirmation. And they got a chalice, and they had to learn. There was like a whole weekend where they had to learn stuff, and they got recognized in front of the congregation. It was very cute because some of the kids showed up to the affirmation service in jeans and a t-shirt like they would have shown up to the fellowship any Sunday. Some of the kids showed up in a full white dress because grandma wanted them to get that dress once, right? You do you. So I think, that helping your family know that your children are not going to be without rituals or markers for their life, but they might look different, and that's okay. My in-laws are Catholic, very, very Catholic. My husband was raised Catholic school, Mass every day, the whole thing. And we were at their house when we got the phone call that we were getting a baby, when we were adopting our son, Nevin. And so it was a lot of jumping up and down and screaming. And I remember after the initial shock wore off, the first question my mother-in-law asked me was, so what sort of blessing do you do at your church? And I remember being really warmed by that because she knew we weren't going to baptize, but she wanted to know what we were going to do. And I explained what we did, and we ended up doing it twice. We did it once at our home congregation in Maryland and once in Chicago for them. And everybody was there, and it was wonderful. So we do have rituals. What's one thing we can do to make the life of a minister easier? That's such a cool question. I think recognizing that the job of a minister is very strange is just helpful. Prior to ministry, I was in psychology, and if you've ever seen a therapist, you know that on the very first session, they sit you down and they talk to you about confidentiality. And they will often say something like, or I said these things, if I see you out in public, I'm not going to acknowledge you. You can acknowledge me, and that'll be fine, but I'm not going to acknowledge you unless you acknowledge me first. That's part of the confidentiality agreement. That is not the case as your minister. It would be very weird if I saw you out in public and didn't acknowledge you, right? I go to your homes. I go to the hospital when you're sick. I meet you out for coffee out in the community. I get invited to a house concert at your house. And yet, there is still ethical boundaries that are very, very important in ministry and that we're trained in extensively. Because we all know that the authority and power that comes with ministry can be and is sometimes abused. And so we're taught how to avoid those conflicts. And one of the main ways we have to avoid those conflicts is not only so that we don't cause explicit harm, but also so that I can maintain the relationship with you that you need when you are in need of a minister. If you and I hang out and go out for drinks and I complain about my husband to you, that's going to make it much harder when you need me to be the minister role for you, when you need to talk to me about your husband. And I need that to come first for your sake. So in a way, it is a one-directional relationship. And that's hard. And it's especially hard because I can't say, outside of these four walls, I'm not going to acknowledge you. there's just a lot more fluidity there. And it's sort of all the time, constantly. Email, joys and concerns, phone calls, 9 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock in the morning. And that's okay. That's my job. But I'm just having to manage that a lot on top of like making a sermon every week. I met with Steve Seek yesterday. Steve used to be our music director, and now he's in seminary. And he was like, I'm preaching almost every Sunday this summer. Man, it's hard. It's like, yeah, like, didn't I just feed you last Sunday? Right, that's what I say to my kids, like, didn't I just feed you dinner yesterday? Gosh, you hungry again? I can't churn out a winner every week, friends. It's just not gonna happen. So having some compassion and understanding that the job is weird, that there's a lot of parts to it, that there's a lot of weird boundaries that I have to sort of manage with you, and maybe don't push on those if you can help it. It's my job to hold the boundary, but it would be helpful. You asked how you could help. And also, maybe say nice stuff sometimes. I do get that from plenty of you, but human beings, you know this because you've experienced it in your own life. The criticism weighs a lot louder, and that's normal. But often we don't notice when something goes right. We only notice when it goes wrong. So maybe occasionally tell Hannah or I or any of the other staff when you notice things going right. That would be helpful too. How many UU churches or fellowships are in the US, the world, and Wisconsin? I don't know. I think about 1,000 in the United States. The average size of a Unitarian Universalist congregation is 100. So that's average. We know how averages work. So most are very, very small. And Wisconsin has 3 large UU congregations, us, Madison, and Milwaukee, and then several smaller congregations. And then there are UU congregations in other parts of the world: India, the Philippines, Romania, England, Mexico. So many great questions here. I'm just going to go a little long. How do we reconcile the worth and dignity, which is our first principle, that every person has worth and dignity? How do we reconcile the worth and dignity of horrible people? So the 7 principles just evolved, but that doesn't mean we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're still useful to us. And worth and dignity, inherent worthiness and dignity, is still written into the new values. But I often say that that's the one of all of the statements of value that is the hardest, because it is a statement of faith. You can't see it. I can't look at you and be like, yes, I physically see your worthiness and dignity. And sometimes we don't act like it. Sometimes we don't act like we have worth or dignity, or we don't act like other people do. And so we have to just have faith that it's there. And speaking of Mike Maines and the Branches, when I had that went to that house concert, that was one of the questions Mike asked me. We were sitting and chatting. Sam Zinth, who was hosting the concert, introduced me as her minister as I'm sitting there, I think with a drink in hand. And this guy, Mike, was like, "What? You're a what?" And he had just shared during his songs about religious trauma. And he said, "What do we do? If you don't believe in hell, what do you do with the people who deserve to go to hell?" And I said, "Oh man, it is so good that I am not God." Like, thank goodness that I don't get to make those choices where people go after they die. Because I might want them to go to hell. That's a reasonable hope when people act sometimes the way they do. But believing that there is a universe that is bigger and more mature than I, and is not going to give people necessarily what I think they deserve, that gives me hope, because I'm not in charge and I don't get to make those decisions. So if you believe in God and you believe in hell or you believe in heaven, like knowing that there is a more loving force that sees the worth and dignity that sometimes we can't see. Whew. Good, right? Whew. We don't have to see it, is I guess what I'm saying. We just have to believe it, even if we don't want to. That's what our principles and our values call us to, is to say, like, I can't see right now that you have inherent worth. But you do, darn it. And if we treat people as if they have inherent worth and dignity, surprise, they start to act more like it. So that is the other piece. It's cyclical. So sometimes, if you're not feeling happy, they say put a pencil in your mouth, and you smile. But it tricks your brain into thinking that you're happy. Same thing. If you treat someone as if they have inherent worth and dignity, even if you don't see it, it will trick you into believing it, and it will eventually, hopefully, help them see it as well. When will the next adult retreat happen? And what's the potential theme or content? Thank you for asking. So last year we did a lot of small groups and asking people what they love and what they missed from pre-pandemic and earlier days of the fellowship. And one of the things we heard was retreats. People love retreats. So we are planning 2 weekend retreats here at the fellowship, one in the fall and one in the spring. You can find information about them online. One of the things that's tricky about retreats is at least pre-pandemic, we were trying to offer some, and we would host them at other retreat centers and stuff, but the expense of that was getting pretty high. People would have to fork over a lot of cash to pay for the overnight retreats. And then we were also excluding people who had children. One of the parents could come, but the other one had to stay home with the kids, or they'd have to get a babysitter for an entire weekend or something, So instead, we're going to do day camp style retreats here. They will be all day Saturday and part of the day Sunday. You'll go home at night, sleep in your own bed, way better than a cabin. And we will have 2 adult tracks at each of the 2 retreats, so you can sign up for one or the other of the adult options. And there will also be a kids camp at the same time. So your kids will have things to do the whole time. I see some parents like, what? And you get a t-shirt. So the first one will be October 12th and 13th, and registration will be open soon, and it is going to be all about our values, so the new UU values. The kids camp is going to be all JETPIG themed. If you don't know about JETPIG, it is the new UU values acronym: Justice, Equity, Transformation, Pluralism, Interdependence, and Generosity, JETPIG. And the adult 2 tracks, one of them will be a theology, exploring your own beliefs, values, and theology, and writing your own credo. So that thing we do with our 9th graders, we will do with you. And the other adult track is going to be a justice-making track, exploring living your values out loud in the world. So you get to pick which one you want to do, and meanwhile, your kids have something to do as well. The one in April, it's also April 12th and 13th, ironically, is going to be, we're calling it Embodying Our Values. And our hope is that it will have a track from our Leadership Development Committee on leadership tools, another track for basically an adapted version of our old heart-to-heart couples retreat. And so for couples who want to deepen their relationship with each other. And the kids camp will be, we're calling it Embodying with a capital body, and it's going to be OWL light. So it's going to be human sexuality, gender, bodies, in a sort of intensive weekend version. So I'm excited. Can you tell that I'm excited? This one says, why was the free and responsible search for truth and meaning removed from the 7 principles, and what replaces it? That is a reference to the new values, the JETPIG values. It wasn't removed. It's in there, and that was what I was trying to look up a moment ago. It is in there, and here it is. It's under pluralism, P for pig, pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. So each of the values has a word, a definition, and then a covenantal statement, which is a promise. So the word is pluralism. That's the definition that I just read. And the covenantal statement is we covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And we embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. So it didn't go away. It's just not listed the same way. And it's my favorite of the former principles. So oh gosh, these are so many good questions. How does the universe work? I don't know. How do we navigate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict when both sides have perpetrated serious war crimes? I don't know. That one, it's already 11, so I need to stop. That one could take me all day, but I guess I'm going to go back to I'm glad I'm not God. I'm also glad I'm not president or running for president. And I think just holding, one of the things Unitarian Universalism primes us to do very, very well, and yet we don't often practice, is holding complexity. Holding that things are far more complex than maybe they appear on the surface or that we would wish they would be. Unitarian Universalism gives us this incredible gift of pluralism, of all of these differences sitting in the same room together, being able to recognize that things are not simple or black and white, and there's not one answer on the mountain, right? That there are so many different ways of holding something, so many different perspectives. And yet often Unitarian Universalists, we tend to just sort of go, well, they don't understand, or if everybody knew about Unitarian Universalism, they'd be Unitarian Universalists. Like, no, that's not nuanced enough. There's a lot of nuance, and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is a deeply complex, heartbreaking conflict. The first week of my sabbatical was just a couple weeks after the attack by Hamas on Israel, October 6th, and I was like, I feel like I don't understand this very well. So I used my entire first week of sabbatical to read and watch documentaries and try to understand the history of the conflict more. Some of my friends were like, what are you doing? Your first week of sabbatical, that's your good idea, and friends, I can tell you that I spent countless hours learning, and I am more confused now. It is so complex, horrifically complex. And the United States and NATO and the UN have a very sordid role in the whole complex situation. Our hands are not clean. And that was one of the pieces that I just left going, gosh, I wish we would just not get involved the way we sometimes do, because we often make it more complex. So that's my answer, is just to pray for peace and hold the complexity. All right, if I didn't get to your answer, I'll try to answer it in a scroll article coming up. Thank you for your questions. And hopefully I can do another UU history class sometime soon, and please make plans to come in October to the retreat. Thank you.